Okay, welcome back. Hopefully those two went well. Check a moment, check your answers. One thing to notice is on the second one, when I added the like terms, there's a negative 15a and a positive 15a. They add up to 0a, so I have no a term in my final solution. We don't write 0a. 0 times a is just 0, and 0 minus 9 is negative 9, so we don't write that in our final solution. We just have no a term. Okay, hopefully those went well. If they did not, please raise your hand so that I can come look at what you did and we can try and figure out what you might be missing. Okay, we're going to continue on to the back. Here now we have more than one variable. It's not going to be any different, but we do have more to think about as we do our multiplication. So the first set of binomials that we're multiplying are written here, and we're going to go ahead and fill in our boxes just as we did before. Put our first term along the box on the left side, and then our second term, negative 8y. Notice it's minus, so I'm putting a negative. Be extra careful about that. Along the top, I have a 5x and a 6y. Okay, now we need to do our multiplication. Again, you look at the column heading and the row heading to figure out what needs to be multiplied. So 5x times 2x multiplies to 10. 5 times 2 is 10. X times x is x squared. Continuing down, I have 5x multiplied with 8y. The 5 and the negative 8 multiply to negative 40. And x times y do not actually multiply together, so we simply write it as x times y. Continuing for our second column, I have the 6y, and I'm multiplying that with a 2x. So multiplying the 6 and 2 gives me 12. Again, I have an x and a y, which I'm going to write as xy. Remember, we said to write these in alphabetical order as we write down these terms. And then our final multiplication has a 6 and a negative 8, which multiplies to negative 48, and a y times a y, which multiplies to y squared. Okay, writing out our final solution requires us to find any like terms. This time our like terms look a little different. They have an x and a y and an x and a y. Here's our only pair of like terms. So writing out our polynomial and adding our like terms starts with our 10x squared. Then we're going to do our xy terms. So negative 40 and 12 add up to, sorry, it's going to be a negative, so I'm going to write that as a minus, a negative 28 xy. Don't change the type of term it is when you're adding. Okay, and then our last term is negative 48 y squared. Here is our trinomial that is a solution to our multiplication. Okay, now it's our time to try it again, but this time we weren't given boxes, so we're going to go ahead and draw our own. Once you've drawn your boxes, label them. Label your sides with your first binomial. We have an x squared and a 3 as our two terms. Our second binomial has an x cubed for the first term. It's not very easy to read, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that. X cubed, exponent of 3. And then a minus or a negative 2x. Okay, now we multiply top and the side here to get x cubed times x squared. Okay, remember when you're multiplying, that means I have 3 x's multiplied with 2 more x's. So adding all those x's together, there's 5 of them, so I get an x to the 5th. Okay, I'm going to continue to multiply down x cubed times 3. There's nothing alike, so I simply write it as a product, 3x cubed. Multiplying x squared times negative 2x gives me negative 2x squared times x cubed. So there's 2 x's here, 1 more x here. I have 3 x's total. Then finishing up, negative 2x times 3 gives me negative 2 times 3 for negative 6x. You will not always have like terms, but often you do. And here again, we have a pair of like terms. We have an x cubed and an x cubed term. The others are different. X to the 5th is not the same as x cubed, and these are not the same as x. Adding our like terms and writing our final answer asks us to find the biggest exponent first, so the x to the fifth. The x to the thirds come next, so let's add those together. Negative 3 and negative 2 add up to 1, so 1x cubed. And then our last term of negative 6x. Here's our final result for our multiplication. As we work with these volume or areas and perimeters, we find that it helps us to go ahead and keep thinking about the same thing we've been doing. So here it's asking us to find the area of a rectangle with the dimensions of 3x plus 5 and 6x plus 2. Let's label our rectangle so we know what that really means. That says one of our sides, we'll go ahead and label over here, is 3x plus 5, and the other side is 6x plus 2. To find an area, you multiply a base times a height. Here's our base, so I'm going to write that in, 6x plus 2. It's the whole thing, so I need to put parentheses around that to say I want to multiply that whole quantity with the height, which also has a sum, so we need parentheses to keep that sum together as the whole height. Okay, we need to multiply this out, so we're going to draw our box. And I'm going to label the side with my first binomial, 6x and 2, and the top with my second binomial, 3x and 5. Multiplying, I'm going to multiply the 3x and the 6x to get 18x squared. Continuing down, I'm going to do 3x times 2 is 6x. Now going across to do the second column, 6x multiplied with 5 gives me 30x. And then finally the 5 with a 2 to get my 10. Writing my final solution, again here are my like terms, my x terms. Now I'm going to write them out in order, 18x squared, 6x and 30x is 36x, and then our final value is 10. That is the area or an expression for the area of this particular rectangle. Okay, let's try a triangle. Okay, don't forget our formula for a triangle. A triangle ends up being half the area of a rectangle. So its area formula is area equals 1/2 base times height. So let's label the information we're given. We're given a base of 4x plus 2. Here's our base. So we're going to write 4x plus 2 there. A height of 3x minus 6. The height is the segment perpendicular to the base that shows that it goes through the highest point of this triangle, so what we call a vertex of that triangle. We have 3x minus 6 for that height. Filling in those values into our formula. It says 1/2 times base times height. So 1/2 times my base, 4x plus 2, times my height, 3x minus 6. Okay, we're going to go ahead and do this in a couple steps. The first thing let's do is multiply our two binomials. So let's set up our box. So we have our first binomial, 4x and 2. Our second binomial, 3x and minus 6, so negative 6. Okay, pause the video and do this multiplication. See if you can do that on your own. Okay, hopefully you've got that multiplication done. We get 12x squared minus 24x and a 6x and a negative 12. So the product that we get here has two like terms again. We get 12x squared minus 18x and minus 12. But that is the product of these two binomials. So there's still this 1/2. Okay, so we need to multiply this whole thing times 1/2, which means we need to distribute 1/2 to each of these terms. So 1/2 times 12x gives me 6x squared. 1/2 times the minus 18 gives me negative 9x. And 1/2 times the minus 12 gives me negative 6.